Hey folks, welcome to CSC324 Advanced Programming, and this video we're going to talk about complex types. So I just want to, we spent a few minutes at the end of class yesterday talking about complex types, so I'm just going to review a little bit. If you want to create a prototype, so this is basically like the Java equivalent of a class, you can do it anytime in JavaScript when you declare a function. So if I say function person and open close curly brace, close curly brace, this actually creates a person prototype object. Okay, so I can draw a picture of that here. So we have the person prototype. And the person prototype doesn't really have anything interesting in it because you haven't added anything interesting to the prototype. So we're going to have basically the following parts. We're going to have a constructor, and that constructor is going to have, I'll just make a little more space here. The constructor is going to have person as the constructor method. And then we're also going to have a prototype link. And the prototype link is going to link to the prototype for the person prototype. And that happens to be the object prototype. So I'll draw that here. And I'm not going to put all, there are quite a few methods in the object prototype. I'm not going to draw all those here. So this is the object prototype. And the object prototype is also going to have a constructor. And that constructor is going to be object. And it's going to have a bunch of other stuff. And at the end, the object prototype is also going to have a link to a prototype. But in this case, the link to the prototype is null. So it stops the chain of inheritance. Now, if I want to create an instance of a person object, all I have to do is use new. But I want to make this a little more interesting. So instead of having the function person not really do anything, I'm going to have the function person, which is basically, this is our constructor, right, for instances of the person prototype. I'm going to have it do something. So I'm going to replace, hang on a second. I'm going to replace, I'll replace all this with a different prototype, a different constructor. So I'm going to say function person, and that function person takes gender as an argument. And then we do open close curly brace, or open curly brace, and we're going to have a member that's associated with this instance, and the member is gender. So to create an instance, we're going to set this gender equal to gender. Okay. And I'm going to close my curly brace. Awesome. So the important thing to understand is that the this.gender doesn't have anything to do with the prototype, but has a lot to do with the instance of the prototype. So now I can write a little bit of code. I can say var p1 equals new person. So I'm calling the person constructor. That'll allow me to create an instance of this person prototype. And I'll pass in male. And I can say var p2 equals new person female. Okay, now if I were to draw what that looks like, it looks to me like I might need to get a little bit of space here. So I'm going to do that in my notes. Got that. And I'm just going to move that over here so I have a little bit of space. Okay. And we'll have P1 here. P1 is going to be a reference to a person instance. And the person instance is going to have two parts to it. Really kind of jam this all together here. I have to write kind of small. It's going to have a gender, which is male, string male, and it's going to have a prototype, and the prototype is going to refer to this, the person prototype. P2, I'll draw P2 down here to give myself a little more space. P2 is also going to have a reference to, this is, I didn't write this up here, but this is a person instance. Okay, so P2 is also going to have a reference to a person instance. And it has a gender of female. Put quotes around that male up here too. And it has a prototype. And that prototype also refers to the person prototype. So, wow, pretty busy diagram. You could probably take a screen snapshot of this and print it if you wanted to. Or even sign it. There, that's my signature. I just made it up. That's actually not my signature, but it looks really cool. Anyway, this kind of shows you the difference between prototypes, instances, and references to instances. And I think what's also important about this is that you can see a chain of inheritance. You can see that person inherits from object. But we're going to make that chain of inheritance a little more explicit in a second. Before we do that, let's just talk about object-oriented programming. So what are the, I just noticed something. I don't know how to scroll. Oh, look, there's a little scroll bar. Perfect. Okay. So what are the key features of an object-oriented programming language? Well, number one, you have inheritance. Number two, you have polymorphism. And number three, you have data and procedural encapsulation. Fancy talk. All right. So inheritance, I think you guys are mostly familiar with that, right? That means an object can have a parent and inherit the members and methods from that parent. And if it wants to, it can override some of those members and methods. Then there's also polymorphism. So what polymorphism does is it allows you to have an object which has a method that gets executed on the object, and you can have a collection of similar objects, all with the same method, but each object's method that has the same name can do something different. So an example of that might be you have a collection of animals, and you have a method called sound. And so as you iterate over the collection of animals and you invoke the sound method, each animal makes a different sound, even though they're all animals. And then you have data and procedural encapsulation. So that's fancy talk for saying that the data, the members of an object, and the methods of an object are all collected in the object. They're not separate. If you think about what we were doing in the early stages of messing around with Python, in the beginning, all we did is declared some variables, some of which were local, some of which were global, and then we declared some methods. But those variables and methods really weren't collected together in any fashion that could be shared across Python programs. But once we introduced the idea of object-oriented programming in Python, you could create classes. Those classes you could create instances of, and you could send those instances to other programs and have them do things, which is what we did when we did the model view controller and DAO design patterns. So given that we have this idea of data and procedural encapsulation, it'd be interesting to see how JavaScript handles that. So I'm going to show you. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the person method. I guess I don't have a continuously scrolling page. That's kind of cool. I'm just sort of learning this. So what does this do? Next page? Right. Let's go to a new page. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify that person method. Again, I'm going to create a new person method. So function person, our constructor, passing in gender, and then I'm going to save that in a member, this.gender. So this is, kind of, this part's a repeat of what we just did. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some methods. So here's a method. Well, I'm going to talk more about methods later, but here's a method that we'll add called sayHi. So this method's called sayHi. And we're going to set it equal to a function. I'm just going to define the function right here. It doesn't even have a name. I'm just defining as a generic function. And I'll have it say console.log hi. Okay, so that takes care of a method called sayHi, which is now associated with the person. And then I'll add another one, this.sayBye is equal to say bye. Now you might be saying to yourself, oh, wait a second, where does that say bye come from? Well, I'll define it right here. Function say bye and we'll do a console.log and we'll have it say bye. Okay. Now, if I declare a person right here, if I say var p1 equals new person male, and then I say p1 dot say hi, what do you think is going to happen? You might be saying, hopefully, you'll be saying, hey, it says console log. It writes hi to the console, which you'd be correct. Let's take a look at what it looks like from a diagram standpoint. Okay, so we've got P1, which is an object reference, and that's going to refer to a person instance. And that person instance is going to contain a couple of things. It's going to contain all the members and methods that we defined in the constructor. So we're going to have a gender method, or gender member, which is going to be male. That's just like the previous example. It's also going to have the say hi method, which has that function that we defined. A little extra space here. Has that function that we defined in the constructor. It has say by, which is going to be linked to the say by function. And we also have the prototype. Okay. And that's going to be linked to the prototype instance, or sorry, the person prototype. And there's stuff in here, which you know from the previous example. Okay? So, if I say p1.sayHi, then what's going to happen is that the method located here, that sayHi method, is going to get invoked. And that will cause the function which issues the console log hi command to get executed. Pretty cool. Okay, so you might be saying to yourself, can we do more? Of course we can do more. I want to show you how to make inheritance a little more explicit and interesting. It's actually, it's a little complicated. It's much easier to do in Java than it is to do using JavaScript, but you can do it if you're careful. And let me explain how. Let's say, let me just write this. So we're talking now about inheritance. Okay, how does that work? So let's say I have a student. Now a student, we could say, is also a person. So how do we show that relationship in JavaScript? Well, first I'm going to create my student constructor, function student, and student is going to get a gender because I want students to have gender. And then I'm going to say this dot gender equals gender. And I'm also going to make it kind of interesting because I want to help you distinguish between the student and the person. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say this dot say hi equals a different function. So I'm going to create a new function that does something different. So function, new arguments, console dot log yo. I'm not saying hi now, we're saying yo. All right. And then what we want to do is we want to say student. Okay, that's good. We'll stop there with the student. Now, there's a couple of other things that I have to do here. One is if I want to connect student to person so that I have that chain of inheritance, what I have to do is I have to modify the information that's stored in the information that's stored about student. So how would I do that? Well, the act of doing this here, creating the function, creates a student prototype. So let me draw that. So we're going to have